It's not just Ukraine where possible war crimes have been committed, it's also Myanmar. The UN has now accused the military junta of human rights violations that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. And unlike in Ukraine, these have been happening for more than a year, since the military deposed an elected civilian government. The UN's allegations are contained in a report by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Our next report sums up what the UN is saying, but a warning. It contains distressing images.
A continuing spiral of violence. That is what the UN has called military actions in Myanmar. Within a year of the coup, 1,500 people have died at the hands of the military. And that number does not even include civilians who were killed in the old ongoing conflict between rebel groups and the army. The UN report is based on interviews with victims, eyewitnesses, and other verifications. It finds that the abuse is systematic.
The report sets out Myanmar's military and security forces' flagrant disregard for human life, bombarding populated areas with airstrikes and heavy weapons, and deliberately targeting civilians, some of whom have been shot in the head, burned to death, arbitrarily arrested, tortured, or used as human shields.
The UN also pointed to incidents where the army hit peaceful protesters or tortured people in detention. The UN says the military has also conducted mass killings.
In December in Kaya State, soldiers burned the bodies of up to 40 men, women, and children. Villagers described discovering the remains in several trucks, with the bodies found in positions indicating that they had tried to escape and they were burned.
Under the guise of clearance operations, the military has raided and burned houses in several villages. According to the UN, the type and level of atrocities seen indicate that the commands came from the top.
And so did bombs from the air. We're talking of airstrikes conducted against civilian populations. You heard the UN spokesperson talk of Kaya State and the military's atrocities there. This is what that looks like. Airstrikes by military planes against civilian targets. This is Kaya State in the east of the country. An NGO worker described it as some of the worst fighting in the country since World War II. The junta targeting anti-coup activists and ethnic armed groups. The latter have already been fighting the military for decades. The NGO Human Rights Watch has been monitoring the situation in Myanmar, and we can now talk to its Deputy Asia Director, Phil Robertson, for more. Phil, talk to us a bit about the military's actions in Kaya State and if that in any way is representative of the junta's actions across the country.
What we're seeing in Kaya State is actions to use the Air Force and the helicopters to attack civilians. This is part of an ongoing action by the Tatmadaw that we've seen across the country, where civilians are being targeted. They are being hit in areas where insurgents are active. They are being treated as if they are insurgents. And these are clearly war crimes, and there are crimes against humanity being committed as well.
Now, the UN earlier in the week referred to those crimes against humanity and war crimes that the military is allegedly committing. Similar accusations have also been made against Russia in its ongoing war in Ukraine. And we've seen the stringent sanctions and the global condemnation that has followed. Do you think something similar needs to be happening in the case of Myanmar?
It's quite clear that the targeted economic sanctions against the military and its interests in Myanmar have to be ramped up in a very significant way. It's been too slow. It's been too little. So far, the pressure really hasn't affected the military junta in Myanmar the way it needs to. And so we do call for a much more comprehensive effort to expand sanctions against not only individuals, but also the companies that are operating under military auspices and the two major military-run conglomerates in Myanmar. to really target these interests and target the money flows that are benefiting Myanmar's generals and enabling them to continue this atrocities against their own people.
Why isn't Myanmar a priority with the world? I mean, it doesn't appear to have been a priority until now. And do you worry that with the situation in Ukraine, Myanmar will further go into the background?
Well, it's quite clear that many people around the world are watching Ukraine very closely, and that anything else is being pushed out of the headlines. We saw a lot of attention paid during the first 6 months after the February 1st, 2021 military coup to what was happening in Myanmar. But now it has essentially been pushed aside. The fact of the matter is that the people of Myanmar are suffering grave abuses at the hands of the security forces. There is an economic crisis, there's a humanitarian crisis, and all of this has been sort of pushed aside because the news that coming out of Myanmar is just more tit-for-tat violence, a slow descent into civil war.
You spoke of the economic crisis, and I do want to talk to you about that because we have some visuals of people facing electricity and water shortages, for instance. These are visuals from the commercial capital, Yangon, where people are having to queue for water and are facing rolling blackouts. I'd like to also play for our viewers, Phil, what some residents have been saying, and then I'll come to you for your views.
Shortages of water and electricity often happen in summer, but it's already bad this year. If there's an electricity blackout, we can use charcoal for cooking. But we can't live without water. Even if there's electricity without water, we can't cook anything.
Phil, you heard some of the voices that we managed to hear from people in Yangon. Do you think this misery of daily living is set to get worse in Myanmar under the military?
Certainly it is, because there is an ongoing economic boycott and a mass strike by many people in Myanmar against the military and the government agencies that are controlled by it. And so, there is an ongoing use of economic power by the people to try to deny the legitimacy of the military junta. And the military junta is striking back very hard, not only with physical violence, like shooting people and arresting people, but also by increasingly coercive efforts to force people to pay bills that they simply can't afford. That involves electricity bills, it involves water bills, but it also involves, increasing prices on the use of the internet and electronic services. So we're seeing now a real pressure that is coming against the people of Myanmar from the military junta, and the situation for them is getting much worse, including food security, health issues, access to basic services like your people indicated.
Phil, we'll have to leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much for joining us.